how did I come across cava in the first place? Why did I even pay attention to this stock? Well, the first thing that stood out to me was the stock being down nearly 70%. So if we look at TradingView, we can see that the stock peaked in late 2024 at nearly $180 a share. It peaked at 172. And then over the next month, we had a drawdown, and then over the next year, we drew down all the way to nearly $40 a share. So this is nearly 70% right here. Now, I've always known about cava. They IPO'd in 2023, as you can see, but I've always just been familiar with them. But there was never really a point during this rally where I thought there was an opportunity. There was just never a point where I really was convinced of the stock or had any sort of belief in taking a position. So what made me take the position? Well, there was a few things. One was I noticed that the stock was getting beaten down because of this narrative forming that slot bowls, which are like all of these restaurants that sell bowls that they create, so like Chipotle, Sweetgreen, and Cava, are dying. Americans don't want slot bowls anymore, and I just thought this was completely irrelevant. I've never heard anyone say that they don't enjoy slot bowls or labeled it as slot bowls. I just felt like this whole term was something that was pushed by bears, and they created this whole just completely irrelevant narrative that I just felt was very just stupid. So that was one thing that I was like, this kind of seems like there's some bear bias in this narrative being pushed. So that was one thing. I just noticed a lot of articles and things being pushed around this whole slot bowl narrative. Now, the second thing was the stock story versus the reality story. Now, the stock was telling the story of, I mean, as we can see here, that this company's dying, right? That this is a business that is slowly dying and people aren't caring about the product anymore. And that's basically what's being told from the stock when this drawdown was happening. But in reality, when I would talk to people and talk to consumers and stalk TikTok, which I'll explain in a little bit, I would see that people actually loved cava. And they loved it so much to the point that they loved it more than Chipotle and Sweetgreen and every other slot bowl competitor. So I was like, okay, this is also interesting. So there's a disconnect here. The stock is saying one thing, but reality is saying another thing. So I'm going to keep this in mind, and I continue to investigate further. And after looking at the management and the financials and realizing, you know, they're a profitable business, unlike Sweetgreen at the time, and their earnings are strong, this seems like something I want to take a position in. So I took some call options, leaps specifically, and here you can see the trade. So this totaled to nearly $15,000 worth of cava call options, and I took this trade on October 10th of 2025. So it was a call option with a strike price of $55 with an expiration of September 18th, 2026. So basically a leap, right? And I was in the money at the time, because if we look at October 10th, 2025, right here is where I took a position. So the stock was trading right around $63 a share, and the strike price was $55. So at this time, I was in the money, right? I felt like this was a relatively asymmetric bet, and it was a safe trade. I felt like, you know, cava is not going to get beaten down much more from this point, and I was confident. Now, the other thing is age bias. So I'm not going to explain this in depth right now, but you can go over to my X and see my pinned tweet, and you'll know exactly what I mean by this after reading this. So this definitely played a role in my conviction and just my believed setup with this trade. So I definitely recommend you go read that thread and just see how that correlates to what I'm explaining here. Now, the second thing we're going to touch on is building conviction. So how did I maintain conviction during this? So we took the trade right around here when it was trading at $60 a share, right around there, and they were in the money calls, so $55 strike price. And as time went on, the stock continued to dip, and at its lowest point, I was nearly down 50% on the trade. So these are call options, right? So as we know, they're leveraged. Things can get bad very quickly if you don't know what you're doing. So I was down nearly 50% on this trade at one point, but I wasn't really worried, because like I knew that this was going to play out the way I envisioned it, just because the stock had to catch up to reality. That was just what I thought. So I built my conviction from using the TikTok feed in Arb Terminal, which basically shows every TikTok that relates to the brand. So there's a live feed that shows what's going on with the brand on TikTok. So not only when people mention cava the ticker, but when people mention cava in general. So you can click on the post and you can open this post in TikTok, or you can look at comments and see what people are saying. So I was doing this throughout my entire trade, not only with cava, but with Chipotle and Sweetgreen as well, and just monitoring TikTok and seeing what people are saying about the brand itself. Do people like it? Do people hate it? Are people switching from one brand or a competitor to cava, or vice versa? I really just wanted to find consumer truth. It was so clear to me that cava was heavily favored by the average consumer in this sector specifically. Everyone loved cava. It was just clear. People loved cava. People were switching from Chipotle to cava. It was just the go-to slop bowl, if you want to put that label on it. So this was a big pillar in my conviction in the actual trade. Now, like I was saying, people love cava. After I would just talk to people in person, online, looking at Reddit, looking at forums, I would see what people think about cava, and I would often ask the question, like, if cava or Chipotle had to disappear, which one would you be more mad about? And nearly everyone would say cava. And the people who would say Chipotle usually hadn't even tried cava yet. So that was another huge signal for me. Another thing was the earnings. So I monitored the earnings very closely. This was kind of where we took the first position, was when they reported 4 cents per share, and they slightly beat earnings. But this was when they really crushed earnings. If we look at the earnings surprise, we can see when they beat it by 33%, and the previous quarter they missed it by 7.7%. So this was in Q3 of 2025 is when they missed it by 7%, and this is kind of when the stock was really bottomed. And then here is where we can see the spike in the stock price if we were to go look at it. But here you can kind of just see a visualization in Arb Terminal of earnings. So I was definitely watching earnings. That was another thing, just keeping that in mind. So finally we have the outcome. What actually came out of this trade? Well, I spent $15,000 on options, and this turned into nearly $27,000. So we had an 80% gain and a net profit of nearly $12,000. And this was all from cava call options. So this was probably the most interesting trade I've ever taken. A lot of social arb was involved in this trade. If you guys are familiar with that strategy, social arbitrage is basically just the strategy of leveraging social media to discover insights and come to better conclusions about stocks, specifically consumer stocks. So I definitely applied this in this trade, and it played out in my favor. So I wanted to share this trade with you guys. Definitely go check out Arb Terminal. It's the tool that we're currently working on. It's basically the Bloomberg terminal, but for the modern investor and trader. So check that out, and then also jump in Arb Network. It'll be at the top of the description below. It's completely free for the first 100 members. It's basically our trading community. So you can share ideas, learn social arbitrage, and just meet other like-minded people. So good vibes in there, good people in there. Jump in there, and I'm actually gonna play the trailer for Arb Network right now. So I'll see you guys in the next video. The online trading community is fucked. I mean, day trading's dead, swing trading doesn't work, so what strategies are left that actually gives you edge as a retail investor? Social arbitrage. Now, what is social arbitrage? Social arbitrage is the strategy of leveraging social media to recognize trends before Wall Street. And in Arb Network, I teach you everything there is to know from start to finish. Plus, you get to meet other like-minded traders who already understand this philosophy and are already making money. So click the button down below, and I'll see you in there.